Welcome to Own Your Story, a podcast series by CF Communications about communication trends, best practice, and advice for entrepreneurs, small business owners, and larger organizations. If you want to know more about public relations, podcasting, content marketing, social media marketing, and digital marketing, this is the podcast for you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Kathleen. Welcome to Own Your Story. This morning, we are chatting to Greg Gordon. Greg, welcome. Okay, so just to give our listeners a little bit of background, Greg Gordon is one of South Africa's most experienced business, technology, and lifestyle journalists and a serious entrepreneur. The amount of businesses that this gentleman has got a part in is amazing. He was the technology editor at the Sunday Times for 25 years and has also been a regular contributor to the Financial Mail, Business Day, and the Mail and Guardian. He's also worked for the London Financial Times as well as the Daily Maverick. And how Greg and I met is that he is the owner of the Media List, South Africa's premier online editorial media, and a partner at media strategy and writing training firm, The Editors Group. This is with authors and journalists Jonathan Anser and Claire O'Donoghue. Now, the Media List is the company that does the media monitoring for CF Communications. And the Editors Group is where Greg and I met when he presented a media training session for an agency that I worked for. So, Greg, don't you also just want to share a little bit about your career, the writing that you've done and the other companies that you're involved with?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Kathleen. I began my career at National Geographic, actually, as a cameraman. And we were documenting South Africa's move towards democracy. So that was a very good start. As you mentioned, I was technology editor of the Sunday Times for 25 years, and that got me to a lot of doors at big technology companies around the world and access to senior executives. And one of the things I noticed was that they were all excellent when it came to dealing with the media. And that was compared to many South African managers and CEOs. We have a handful who are extremely good at dealing with the media, but there are many that require help. And that's why we established the Editors Group, whereby we can give people the help that they need, because it's not a complex process, but if you know a few tips and tricks, you can make it a lot easier.
Absolutely. So, Greg, with us being in the media industry, we know that if a brand wants to get more media coverage for their business, it's essential that they're seen and heard in the media on a regular basis. Journalists are constantly looking for interesting and engaging stories that they can develop for their viewers and their listeners. And when a CEO or a business owner or an entrepreneur makes themselves available for commentary in the media, they position themselves and their brand in a powerful way so that people can notice, what they have to say. And this is where media training comes in. So don't you just want to tell us a little bit more about media training and why it is so important that a company spokesperson actually undertakes the training?
Okay, so media training is a process where you learn how to deal effectively with the media. As a spokesman for an organization, it's your job to field media inquiries, but more importantly, you can help identify and pursue opportunities where you can raise your organization's profile using the media. There are skills you learn that make it easier to do this and to present yourself in the best possible way. Media training is important because it allows you to use editorial channels rather than paid for advertising to promote your product or services by way of your expertise. There are techniques to storytelling, and media training shows you what they are and how you can use them to your best advantage. In many cases, it can help crystallize an organization's broader strategy by condensing it into succinct definitions. Pretty much like anything, it's a lot easier when you know how and are armed with the right skills.
Absolutely. What would you say are the benefits of media training, both to the brand as well as to the spokesperson himself or herself?
I think the principal benefit of media training is that it helps you become a better communicator. whether it's through the written word by doing interviews or taking advantage of publicity opportunities. You're equipped with the skills to make this happen. If the media identifies you as a good source because you are articulate and knowledgeable, the benefit to your organization is immense. Your expertise and understanding of what the media wants makes you a go-to professional, and that's something that raises awareness in audiences, whether they're reading, viewing, or listening. Different media platforms call for different responses, and you'll be prepared for all of them if you're trained. Media training means you're prepared to be responsive, but you're also able to seek opportunities.
Yes, and as the journalist and the editors get to know you, they'll go to you unsolicited. So you don't need to put out a press release or an article in order to get the interview invitations. They'll just reach out to you because they know that you're a subject matter expert in whatever the industry is that they're writing on.
Yeah, and that that you're always available. I remember when I was writing a lot about technology, security was a big issue, still is. And I had a go-to guy, and I knew if I phoned him, he would be available, he would be articulate, he would be informed. But the key thing was that he knew his subject, but he was always available. I remember phoning him once. He was on a beach in Mauritius. He picked up the call, he did the interview, and that stuff's like gold. And that meant that every time there was a big story, I would go to him, and he got the exposure. He gave me the information I required, and that was important to our audience. But it also raised his profile because he became a sort of acknowledged expert.
Yes, that I do know that availability is something that's very important. There's, especially because of the deadlines that the media work under, they don't have time for you to to wait until you're available.
And that's what we hammer home to people. It's one thing. Your agenda will be to obviously raise your profile and therefore the profile of your organization in the best possible light. But the media also has a job to do, and they have their own requirements, and it's important that you understand that, because if you do, you're kind of reading off the same hymn sheet.
And see, and this is also what gives you the edge with your training, is because you've been on the other side.
Yeah, I do have experience of both sides, and that's an enormous benefit. And I think part of the training is to show people that balance as well. There are two sides to every story, and there's two sides to the process of effective PR, but three sides actually. There's wanting to get your message out, fulfilling the requirements of the media, and then the third thing is balancing those two, so that everybody wins.
Yes. So if we have a business owner or an entrepreneur who's decided that they need PR as part of their marketing and communication strategy, and they are going for media training, what can they expect?
Media training, it does a lot of things, and I'll run through a few of them off the top of my head. Firstly, it's to do with messaging. So it's how to say what you mean simply in order to be understood quickly. You'll learn what the media wants versus what your company wants. So you have to match expectations with reality. You have to learn how to tell a story. I call it the granny principle. If my granny can understand it, then a much broader audience would understand it. You'll also learn about facing the media, precision planning your media strategy, knowing your business, brand, and the current climate. You also learn how to be prepared for all sorts of different scenarios. We'll prepare you for the interview, how to plan that, how to listen to a question, the importance of quick and effective responses. You'll also learn the power of words, loaded language. You need to choose your words and phrases carefully because they have consequences.
Yes.
You'll also learn about attitude, confidence versus arrogance. People love to listen to a confident person, but there's a fine line between that and an arrogant person, and it's important that you figure that out. You learn how to deal with interview ambushes, how to buy time, how to respond to things, particularly tough questions. And then we do practical exercise, interviews and outcomes. Other little things like how to prepare for appearance in front of a mic or a camera or an audience. So all of these, and a photograph, for example. So all of these skills are things that you learn, and you can put them into good use very quickly. I've always said forewarned is forearmed, and if you're prepared, you have a much better chance of portraying your organization in a good light, but more importantly, subtly getting your message across.
Yes.
It's not, you don't want to, it's not advertising.
Yes,
Public
absolutely.
relations.
Yes.
And so, yeah, you need to know the difference.
So how would you create your key message when you work with an organization? How do you create your key messages and then also ensure that you actually bring it across in the interview?
Well, for starters, you have to have something of value to say, something that an audience will find important or interesting. That's what news is. It's the 3 I's. It's information that's interesting or important.
Yes.
So you need to think about what story you want to tell and why the audience will find it useful. It's not really an opportunity to plug your organization. It's a way of of associating it with an important or interesting story. If a journalist is pitching a story to an editor, they have to be able to answer the question, so what? Nobody's interested in your product launch. If you say you've got a new product going to market, well, so what? Nobody cares. What they might find interesting is what that can do for them. So it's really your job to frame that story, but you should bear in mind that you need to include who, why, what, where, and when, and how. Those components are what will help you create your story and then pitch it or sell it to a news organization.
Absolutely. How do you prepare for difficult questions?
Yeah, that's one of the key lessons that people need to learn.
Because people are scared. That's one of the reasons why some of the spokespeople are scared to do radio or television interviews, because what if they ask me something I don't know? What if they ask me about this crisis we had a year ago and I don't know how to answer it?
Exactly. So it can be intimidating, but there are ways to deal with that. Firstly, just as a rule, always tell the truth. Don't lie, because if you do, your reputation and your organization's reputation will suffer significant damage. So ways you can prepare, you can have a set of pre-prepared phrases. There's a lot of subtle ways of answering difficult questions. But at the same time, you don't want to appear evasive. So we teach some of the phrases and the tricks that you can learn to help you navigate what can be a bit of a minefield. If you are uncomfortable answering a question, there are ways around it, and media training helps you with this. Also, remember that just because someone asks you a question, it doesn't mean you have to answer it. There are techniques that cover this too. However,
and that doesn't include saying no comment.
Exactly. That's not going to be helpful.
Yes. So one of the things I do know that you do is it also depends on the organization that you work with, because if you know this organization regularly deals with, let's say, government or with, contentious subjects, then you will know what subjects they need assistance on and which messages they need assistance on and help them with that.
Oh, for sure. Look, it's not a right, but you can ask to see some questions beforehand. Some journalists will say absolutely not. Others will think that it helps them.
Yes.
So that's one route you can take. You can say, happy to help. Could I have a look at some of the questions?
Yes.
If you know an interview will be difficult, preparation is the key.
Yes,
absolutely. If you have your facts in front of you, just think before you speak, and generally it turns out okay.
Is there some kind of a technique that you teach to help the spokesperson try and maintain control in an interview and the direction the conversation goes into?
Yeah, as an interviewee, you have limited control over the direction things will take. I'm not saying you have no control.
Because they have an agenda. There's a reason why they want to ask you these questions.
There's sometimes it's not as sinister as that. Most good journalists will control the interview. and they'll guide you back to questions if you stray too far from the topic. The key is to stay on topic and answer the question as straightforwardly as you can. Media training helps you with this by teaching you how to frame answers, thereby staying the flow of the conversation. It's much easier when you respond to questions in writing because you have time to consider or adjust and rewrite answers. But, with preparation, planning, confidence, and openness, you'll usually produce a good result. So I guess in a nutshell, if you can have sight of the questions beforehand, that helps. But remember that, they can throw curveballs at any time.
Yes.
I've found historically that most journalists aren't trying to, do a character assassination. They're trying to get a good story. But if they do ask you something that could possibly be contentious, it's a good idea beforehand to think of all the possible angles they could take, and have some crib notes with you. If you're doing a session over the phone or without a screen, you can have a whole bunch of sort of pre-planned responses, and you can rehearse them before you go on record.
And that's also why you have a PR company to assist you, is that they will know what these potential questions could be and assist you in forming those responses.
Absolutely. So their responsibility is to prepare you, to say, have you considered this angle? Have you considered that angle? Have you considered why they are phoning you for an interview? And then probably the most difficult part for the PR firm is to balance the expectation of the client, who wants maximum exposure, with the needs of the media, who have a completely different agenda.
Yes.
So it's tricky. It's a balancing act, but it's certainly achievable, and you can get really good results.
So, Greg, what is the most important thing that a business owner or an entrepreneur who, they're going into PR now, it's part of their strategy, and they're going to do media training, what is the most important thing that you can tell them?
I think, the two key takeaways are that you need to be prepared, and you need to know what the media expects. You need to know how to tell a story or to answer questions. If you do, you become a valuable source for journalists and editors who will seek you out for information. But you can be proactive. If you feed them good story ideas, are available when you're needed, and you're articulate, you'll find you get good exposure. And because it's editorial, it's free.
Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate that. How can people get hold of you?
You can find us at www.medialist.co.za. All our contact details are there. It tells you a little bit about what we do. Otherwise, you can mail me directly at Greg, so it's GREG, at GordonSA, GORDONSA.com.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Greg, and thank you for your time today.
Okay, thanks, Catherine.
Thanks for listening to Own Your Story. To find out more about CF Communications, please visit www.cfcommunications.co.za, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.